Let's move on to PIDS, which for everyone is a Project Initiation Document Program. The recommendation will be to hold it open and come back at the May revise hearings about both that and the capital outlay support program to come up with some review of the level of resources requested for both. The governor's proposal is to increase the number of positions to develop sufficiently to develop roughly 40 additional project initiation documents, and then others for projects, ongoing projects, and then there is a part of that budget request is a reduction and 7 fewer positions due to various other workload adjustments. So let's talk about this in general. Let's hear from the LAO first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you stated, this request is for a net increase of 25 positions and $3.4 million over the 14-15 levels in the PIDS program, broken across two main components, and our recommendations will follow those components. The first is $2 million in 14 positions to develop roughly a $500 million shelf or queue of PIDS over the next 2 years in order to meet unexpected surges of funding. And the second major component is $2.6 million excuse me, and 18 positions to develop PIDS to handle the estimated $300 million increase in available SHOP funding. And again, our recommendations will follow these components. First, we would recommend rejecting the $2 million in 14 positions to develop the shelf or queue for a couple of reasons. First, it's unclear to us which problem or what problem exactly this proposal is designed to solve, as Caltrans historically has done a very good job of handling surges of funding without the need to create or fall back on a shelf. And second, we would note that PIDS are in many ways living documents. They're not simply created and then set aside. They must be updated every 6 months to a year to ensure that they're consistent with the realities of the project on the ground. And doing those updates increases the cost of the PIDS. And so as this proposal is likely to increase the cost of developing these PIDS without a real problem being solved, we find that cost increase unjustified. The second component is those 18 positions and $2.6 million to deal with the increase in SHOP funding. And we would concur with your staff and recommend holding this item open to hear in the May revision hearings. In our initial analysis of this item, we identified a couple of issues with this. The first is that there's a lack of robust data to determine the appropriate level of this request. There is supplemental reporting language passed in 2013-14 that required Caltrans to report on estimated and actual costs and workloads of developing these PIDS annually. Caltrans did not deliver that report in 2014, but did deliver it in 2015. Having reviewed the report, we find that it doesn't provide quite the level of detail the SRL requires, but Caltrans concurs with this and has committed to work with us to improve that report in future iterations. Okay. Having reviewed that report, which provides aggregate data, the request seems generally reasonable. However, the other issue we raised was the potential to redirect resources from the capital outlay support program, which is potentially overstaffed and has many of the same job classifications and skill sets, and therefore has the possibility to redirect those positions. So we'd recommend holding this open and hearing it alongside the COS request in May.
All right. I'd like to hear from Caltrans on this.
Yes. Madam Chair, we actually would not disagree with the LO's recommendation to hold this over and continue to work with them to update the information they have. With respect to the shelf that we intend to work on, the idea there is, and I really appreciate the acknowledgement that we've been able to deliver what was asked of us in the past. But that's also because we had some reserve projects that were in the works that were in fact available for us to get once funding shows up. And so in the current situation where there's a lot of conversation about potential federal funding and state funding, we have no bench of projects to call into production and deliver as soon as possible. And so there's that lag time that it takes to get projects done, and that really is what we're asking.
All right. Thank you for that. Are there questions? Senator Nielsen?
Yes, I appreciate putting it over as well. And it appears to me that this is a permanent staffing and permanent expenditure that's seeking out a rationale for its purpose. it would seem to me that this project initiation document or process should have been a given for decades. And what's new that this is going to solve? This is not a rhetorical, it's a substantive observation that I'd like to see you address in our next hearing, okay? Thank you.
I would like to add that these are, we do a zero-based budgeting on the PIDS program every 2 years. So it's a 2-year cycle, and then each 2 years we look at the next 2-year cycle of PIDS that we're going to complete. One of the things I would like to add that, you know, historically, there was a shelf of PIDS, and we treated it was a little bit different. It was treated as a shelf of available projects when funding would become available. We're really looking at this as more of a queue of PIDS. These are all projects that are the next ones out. So, you know, we have a 4-year shop cycle, and we're doing PIDS for 2 years, and we're looking at doing the next projects out. This gives us flexibility as we move forward, as projects come in, that if it's unexpected, or if we're working on a PID on a project and we determine that that particular project, for some reason, having looked into it, is not viable, it doesn't force our hand of, well, what are we going to do now, because we've only scheduled just enough PIDs for the amount of funding we have available. So it does give Caltrans more flexibility. It isn't none of the PIDs are going to be done on any of the projects that are, you know, somewhere down the road. They're the next ones in line. One thing to note is that in 2009-10, Caltrans had about 100 PIDs on the shelf. That number went down to about 50 in 2012-13. We currently don't have any PIDs on the shelf. We've exhausted all the PIDs through ARA funding, through some project savings, that sort of thing. So the idea of having, you know, the $250 million that we're talking about doing really only represents about 1/10 of a year of shop. And we're talking about doing $250 million this year and $250 million that year. But then once we have that queue in place, we won't continue to add to the queue. It'll just flow along with the project. So really that part of the request is more of a limited term part of the request. And then we can look at that every 2 years and see whether, you know, if we went $200 million into the queue, then we would need $200 million to build it. If we had more than that left in the queue, then we would adjust downward the other way. But we'd constantly be looking at it. And then as far as the SLR, the report that we presented on PIDS in 2015, because the report began in 2014 and it's a report on completed PIDS, all we have are PIDs that were completed in that 1-year cycle. And sometimes, you know, if a PID was started 6 months into it, then it will not be completed. So some of the data in the report is difficult to apply across the board because the longer-term PIDs, bridge PIDs, some of the more extensive PIDs, will not be counted. So it'll look like we're completing all the PIDs and they're all being completed in this short time period, but that's because it's sort of going to leave out. So we're working with the LAO. A lot of their, you know, most of their comments are true, and you know, we want to work to have the best product we can on this. But the data is so much better this year, having a whole year versus last year where we had just 1 quarter. We think that next year's data, having 2 years plus a quarter, will be, you know, that much more helpful and useful towards, you know, determining what level we should go towards. And then one last thing I want to say about PIDs is PIDs only represent about 1% of the cost of the projects overall. They're the preliminary scoping, they're the preliminary look, and so when it comes to determining projects and determining where we're going in the future, they do a lot of good for a very small part of the cost, and probably and don't on the surface seem like a good place to really try to scrimp. That, you know, this is where we really determine what we're going to be doing on a project for many years, possibly in the future. So we really should have a good idea, and you know, and you know, to the extent we can, be efficient, but not try to be overly efficient there.
All right. Thank you for that discussion. We'll hold that open. Look forward to seeing that when we get to the May revise. Let's move on to item 3, which is the Transportation Management Systems, the TMS system for maintenance and engineering. The governor's proposal is $6.6 million from the SHA and 64 permanent positions for Caltrans to support the TMS. The recommendation is to approve. Any comments from members? All right, is there a motion? So moved. All right, it has been moved. Any public comment? All right, seeing none, please call the roll.
Senator Wolk?
Aye.
Senator Nielsen? No. Senator Pavley?
All right, that is approved 2-1. Moving on to item 4, which is highway relinquishments, trailer bill language. The governor proposes a language that would expand the role of the CTC and Caltrans in order to streamline the process for relinquishing portions of the state highway system that primarily serve regional or local purposes. Maybe we can have Caltrans speak to that. Our recommendation, however, is we want the policy committee to consider this issue rather than the budget committee. So without prejudice, it would be a rejection. Just move on where it goes.
Our position is we don't disagree with staff's position to reject without prejudice.
Okay, we just think that this is a policy issue more than or at least first and foremost. All right, any comments on this one? The recommendation, we do need to reject it so it gets to the policy committee.
Yeah, we've used a lot of our Caltrans remnant properties, if you will, for park and ride lots and things like that. That are consistent with the purpose of
Absolutely.
compatible uses of getting people to carpool freeways.
Absolutely. So is there a motion to reject without prejudice? All right, it's been moved by Senator Pavley. Is there public comment on this? Sure.
Madam Chair, Bob Naylor, representing Amador County Transportation Commission. We want to support the staff recommendation to make this a policy committee determination. Our concern is that with respect to highways that are designated in statute as interregional, the legislature ought to retain its jurisdiction over that and not turn it over to the CTC.
Well put.
Madam Chair, Paul Smith, Rural Counties Association. My colleague, Mr. Naylor, absolutely right. We believe this is a conversation in Policy Committee. We want to work with the staff and administration on that in that venue.
All right, thank you for that. Further comment? All right, seeing none, let's vote.
Senator Wolk?
Aye.
Senator Nielsen? Senator Pavley?
All right, 3-0. We wish good luck to the policy committee. We have another item in the same vein, the highway tolling issue, the trailer bill language. The recommendation again is that this should really go to the policy committee. Are there any comments from Caltrans?
We also would not disagree with the recommendation to reject without prejudice.
Okay, do I have a motion to that effect? All right, it's been moved by Senator Pavley. This is to reject, again, without prejudice, the trailer bill language so that the policy committee will consider the proposal. Public comment?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, John Moffett on behalf of Enterprise Holdings, Enterprise Rent-A-Car. We have no opinion on whether this should happen through the budget or through the policy committee. I think our major concern is as more toll roads and authorities are established in the state and more existing authorities move to electronic tolling systems. For large fleets like Enterprise, we have 150,000 cars here in California, 1.2 million throughout the nation. It's a significant chunk of those make their way to California. And our issue is that there are existing electronic tolling systems in the state that work well with that system, and others that do not. San Francisco is a system that works very well. We upload all of our VINs to the San Francisco Tolling Authority. If one of our vehicles goes through the toll and someone doesn't pay, we're immediately notified about that electronically, and it's paid generally within hours. The tolling authority gets their money, and state law allows us to go back to our renter and say, hey, you know, there's a charge here, a toll you didn't pay. We can recoup our funding. In other parts of the state, it's a little more messy. By time we have found out about the toll that wasn't paid, a fine has been attached, and it's required us to go back to our renter and say, we're so glad you came to California and visited our beautiful state. Here's a $57 fine. come back soon. It's not about money. It's about the fact that it puts us in a difficult scenario when we're willing to make sure that toll is paid immediately. And to be frank, it is a tourism issue. Someone comes to our state, goes home, and 14 days later gets a bill from us for $57 for a fine on a $3 toll. They're not happy. And so we'd like to see something put in the law that for large fleets, and it can't just be transponders. We can't put a transponder in all 1.2 million of our vehicles throughout the country. There are other systems that exist, and we'd like to see that recognized in the law and something that allows toll authorities to work with us to make sure that the toll authority gets the money it's due without any undue heartache on our behalf or on behalf of our customers.
All right. Yes, Senator Pavley.
It wasn't a question, it was time for comment.
Sure, comments, absolutely.
We had made the motion regarding this particular item, but I just wanted to note for the record, I did not support SB 1077. That's the pilot program. I'm a little skeptic.
Oh, wait.
Is this,
We're
I'm in
not
the
there
right
yet. Hang on.
category?
No, let's do the tolling and
Finish that off.
finish
Okay.
that off.
All right.
Further comment on item number 5?
That's to reject without
Yes, and I believe you made a who made it?
Yep, I think I did.
Senator Nielsen? Oh,
Just
you
an
have a comment?
observation that Mr. Moffett got away. I was going to ask him this question, maybe more, no, that's okay, Mr. Moffett, more rhetorically, but I think there's a point to it. It might appear to me that a local tolling authority would find it in their best interest to delay this so that there was, in fact, a greater amount of fine that wouldn't accrue to that local tolling authority. It's not beyond government to try to figure out that angle, folks.
All right, the recommendation again is to reject this proposal without prejudice and send it to the policy committee. We had a motion? All right, please call the roll.
Senator Wolk?
Aye.
Senator Nielsen? Senator Pavley?
3-0. We look forward to seeing that after determination from the policy committee. All right, now, Senator Pavley, we'll move to item 6, which is the road usage charge pilot program.
Getting ahead of myself.
That's okay. Again, this is in response to this is implementation of 1077 de Saulnier. So first, let's from the department and then from LAO.
Well, in September of the past year, the governor signed SB 1077 into law, and the law required the state to explore the potential for mileage-based revenue collection for our roads and highways in the state as an alternative to the gas tax system. The Department of Transportation is requesting $9.4 million in resources and about five positions on a 3-year limited term basis. The revenues that we currently collect through the gas tax process are in decline and have been in decline for years. Cars are becoming more fuel efficient. Alternative fuels are emerging in the market. Maintaining existing infrastructure remains a top priority for the administration, but the state faces ongoing funding challenges. So simply, the gas tax will not meet our long-term needs, and it's not a sustainable source of revenue, which is really why this pilot is important to us.
All right. LAO.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item includes requests at both Caltrans and the CTC to implement the requirements of SB 1077. Specifically, it's $8.8 million in one-time contract funding for Caltrans to contract for the pilot design and implementation, $618,000 a year for 5 3-year limited-term positions at Caltrans to assist in the design and implementation of the pilot, and then $162,000 a year for 1 3-year limited-term position at the CTC to, again, assist in pilot design and implementation. And in our analysis of this issue, we raised a couple of concerns that we would recommend the legislature have the administration address to their comfort before approving it. First of all, the proposal seems to be inconsistent with the process laid out in SB 1077, which directed the CTC to create a technical advisory committee to develop recommendations around the design and implementation of the pilot. That would presumably include the size, scope, and who was implementing. These recommendations assume that 1, Caltrans will be the implementing department, and 2, make certain assumptions about the size, scope, and method by which the pilot will be implemented. both of which are premature given the lack of recommendations from the advisory committee. Second of all, we would note that Caltrans has already signed a $7.7 million contract to both design and implement the pilot. And we'd also note that there is no complete plan for the remainder of the contract funding being requested. So again, we would recommend the legislature require the administration to address those concerns before approving this item.
All right, I have some concerns about the recommendation in light of what the LAO is saying. Why part of this is provisional language to give Caltrans the flexibility to encumber the funds through 2018. I mean, given what I've just heard, I'm not sure why that recommendation makes much sense at this point. However, I'd like to hear from the rest of the committee. Senator Nielsen?
Certainly look forward to more information. I would indicate that this is hugely controversial. Does anyone have any idea how the mileage per car or truck will be determined? What basis? We're going to put GPS on everybody, or how are we going to know how many miles someone drives?
Senator Nelson, Stephen Keck with Caltrans Budget Office. I'll be happy to address that question.
Please.
So SB 1077 envisioned a construct where a technical advisory committee was put together and chaired by the California Transportation Commission. And the charge of 1077 was to have the technical advisory committee make recommendations on what those options would be. So they are currently, as we speak, and Susan Branson from the CTC may have detailed information, but the TAC has already met, I believe, 3 times. They're discussing all of the options. They're looking at different ways to get this mileage information. They're looking at different ways in contacting the public, and certainly whatever they recommend, the department will implement. Another piece of 1077 also directs the department to provide support to the CTC. It's quite clear in the bill. So that's why we're coming forward asking for this appropriation, is so that we can provide the support in implementing this pilot to the TAC, which is set up under the auspices of the commission.
Okay, just to be advised, that's a big hill to climb. I can say in good conscience that folks that live in the 19 counties that I've represented over the years, the majority are not really going to be very happy with this.
Senator Pavley, you had some comments that you wanted to make early on.
Yes, well, one of the LAO comments.
Yeah.
I appreciate this being continued, but I'm in a little awkward position here. I voted against this bill. I have concerns over, first of all, I appreciate the fact we don't have enough money coming in to, take care of our roads and maintenance from the gas tax. And one of the reasons is I've been a huge proponent of clean air, fuel-efficient vehicles. That's not a problem. That's actually a plus. We're also the beneficiary of the price per barrel of oil dropping. I don't think any of us are advocating gas price increases. So we need to figure out perhaps another way to fund the maintenance of our roads. And I want to help with that. But I just have a philosophical problem of a mileage-based user fee, not just for the privacy concerns, but a lot of the public in general doesn't have the luxury of being able to live where they work. I would like to own a home in San Francisco, but it's not going to happen, can't afford it. So if you want a house and you have kids and a family, you may have to live in Vacaville or something. You're going to be paying more, and the people that have that luxury of being able to live close to their work are going to rack up the miles. I just think that's a real sort of penalty more on the middle class and trying to balance this funding source on sort of an arbitrary way of doing it. If the idea is to discourage people to get out of their car and commute, well, that would help to some extent, providing there's transit options that are available. But, 2-income families, and you're moving all around. So this would, I, of course, would be supporting some kind of a measure on the ballot or whatever in order to maintain, fund monies because of the reduced amount of monies coming in the traditional way we funded road maintenance. But I think I follow this in Oregon. I just think there's going to be a lot of people very upset with this. If you live like Los Angeles area and your job's in Santa Monica, no one no one of average means could ever afford to live near there, so they're commuting 40 miles from the San Fernando Valley where you can afford to pay the rent. Those are the people that are going to be paying a disproportionate share of this. So I know it's considered a user fee, but I'm not sure it's fair.
All right, in the light of the conversations from both my colleagues, certainly we're going to hold this item. And if there's, did you have a comment from the CTC? I think the comments have been really clear.
Yeah, no, I think
It's up to you. Go ahead.
Well, Chairwoman and members, I'm Susan Branson, Chief Deputy Director for the California Transportation Commission. Executive Director Kimpton would want me to express how sorry he is not to be here today. I just wanted to assure you that, the comments that I'm hearing today, that the Technical Advisory Committee that was formed under SB 1077 is made up of a group of members who are addressing and looking at the social equity and the privacy rights and, a lot of the issues that you've brought up today. And one of our charges is to gather public input and to, bring that forward and make sure it's a very public and open process. So I just appreciate your consideration of our request, the Commission's request, and Caltrans.
Thank you. I think just some direction to staff. I think one of the appropriate paths to move forward, if we move forward at all on this, is to not consider this a three-year, no three-year limited term position, no, to have a one-year appropriation with some serious oversight as it moves along. So the recommendation is to we'll hold this item. Did you stand up because you have something to say? Come on over. Yeah.
This was, I thought it was a pilot program.
Yes.
The way I'm reading this, it's a pilot program with recommendations for the implementation of the pilot program. So it's not a pilot program to just to study how it would work.
Exactly.
It's implementing it.
I think you should listen carefully to all the comments, and we'll try this again. Yes, public comment.
I'm Joshua Stark with Transform. We work on sustainable and equitable land use and transportation policy. I'm not commenting right now on the budget proposal, but on just the general concept. Transform was supportive of the Senator's bill last year and have been pleased with the way it's been moving forward. One point I thought I should raise is that currently drivers who drive more pay more in gasoline taxes, in excise taxes. So there is right now currently a mileage-based fee, as it were, or tax structure that does penalize people who have to commute longer distances. In fact, folks who earn less it's almost doubly regressive in that they have to drive farther. They also cannot afford more fuel-efficient vehicles. The beauty of the potential of the road usage charge is that you can address those concerns. You can address them maybe on the back end, perhaps as an example, as a hypothetical example, by having an income check. You can make this a stepped progressive fee structure to address those concerns. You can provide some kinds of benefits for folks who are able to afford vehicles that do not emit carbon dioxide or other criteria pollutants. So there are ways you can do this that currently we are completely unable to do by relying solely on gasoline taxes, while at the same time we do continue to penalize people who can't afford to drive so far, but who are forced to drive so far. And the ability to use this, I'm so sorry, in the future for other mode shift can help provide the long-range infrastructure that's required to help people switch, because we've found in our research that families save, on average in the state of California, over $3,500 a year if they live close to high-quality transit. So providing that in the future through revenues such as these that are currently constrained by the California Constitution, for example, really opens the door to possibilities to make this much more equitable. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to relitigate SB 1077. I think the issue is how this is structured, how this process is structured, clarity needs to be a pilot program, and really the necessity to exercise oversight over how it proceeds. It is not the law. I mean, it is the law to do a pilot program. So I think comments have been really clear. Yes, yeah?
I'll be short.
That's
I
it.
just want to make sure that it's clear that this proposal is not in any way to implement any of the chosen positions. The study itself is going to take, we have a year for the TAC to meet. Then there's a process after that to prepare the different options that we're going to be studied. And then there's a time to do an actual, so the 3 years that we're talking about here, at the end of that time period, we still are then preparing what potential type of offerings we could move forward with. But there's no funding that's being offered up here for implementation of any type of program. This is all just to comply with the 1077 as tasked.
Well, there's nothing wrong with added oversight. So incorporate that somehow, and maybe we'll be able to get through this. So I leave it to you.
It's a little misleading the way it's written and managed the contract for the implementation of the pilot program.
Well, I agree. All right, that item is held. All right, moving on to item 7, which is fish passages. There is no proposal for this item. Perhaps Caltrans, there were a number of questions that were put forward. And do we have DFW here by any chance, Fish and Wildlife too? Come on down.
Yeah.
All right, I'm not so much interested in the specific projects. I think the issue is a policy one. There are fish barriers, and clearly there's an effort, there should be an effort to deal with these issues. So maybe you can give us a tiny bit of background. Who's kind of the lead in this? Is it Caltrans?
Yes.
DFW? Yes?
If I may,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
The department has been working in compliance with environmental regulations and laws, including the Federal Endangered Species Act and Senate Bill 857. As a component of our environmental stewardship and commitments, the passage of fish through state highway crossings and rivers has long been a concern for us. And so where we've had those incidental the coincidence of our roadways and our facilities with streams and fish passages, we've taken care to try and address that access, provide that access to them. And so we've been working through a process of making sure that as we do these projects that we engender improvements to mobility of fish through those constraints.
Well, there are hundreds of them.
Yes.
So you have a priority list? How many are proposed? Yeah.
Obstacles in there because this has been ongoing.
Not many are getting done. Is it a money issue? Is it a resource issue? I mean,
We do. I think over the recent years, we've worked on about 31 of them. Again, I think I understand the concern that there's a lot of them, and we're going through them systematically. Beyond that, we have about 27 of them currently in process in the course of the projects that are in fact in place that can take care of them. We can only work on them as the projects show up to address them. And so we've taken very strong diligence in ensuring that where there is an opportunity that we in fact do this, and work very closely with our resource agency colleagues to identify the opportunities without fail.
so when a project like this comes up, the removal of the fish, the addressing of the fish issue and the cost to correct that is automatically included in the project? It's not something you have to come separately for in a separate process, or?
Yes, we do. That's exactly right. We have a database that we are working from, and through that database, we've been able to identify. Currently, I said we're working on 27 of them. We've also identified about 36 that are high priority, such that when those projects become imminent, they will then become part of the process. It will become one of the things that we have to do in the course of implementing that project will be a fish passage remediation.
So Fish and Wildlife, your role in all of this? And
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Stafford Lair, I'm the Chief of Fisheries for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So to put this into context, the barrier and passage database contains about 6,300 barriers statewide. And to put it into perspective, over the last 10 years, approximately 416 of those barriers have been remediated. Within the last 5 years, 175 of them. So total remediation since the problem was identified statewide has been about 850 barriers have been remediated. So the Caltrans barriers are but a mere subset of the total. And as the Chief Deputy Director did state, where there's opportunities, there's been strong collaboration with Caltrans. Mainly that collaboration falls out through the Fish Passage Forum, of which Caltrans is a member. Fish Passage Forum is a partnership, part of the National Fish Habitat Action Plan. And Caltrans and the department work collaboratively multiple times per year in identifying those opportunities and then seeking solutions to the point of Caltrans funding department staff to assist in engineering review. I think it's a good relationship. It can only get stronger as we move forward and opportunities arise, especially as we move through this crisis of drought. Getting fish access to cooler, better habitat is imperative. And we have renewed efforts through multiple opportunities, whether it be drought funding or other means.
Perhaps there might be some Prop 1 funding that would make sense to augment some of this existing backlog.
So Proposition 1, the department right now is getting ready to release its guidelines on Prop 1, and it's a public process. Those priorities will be identified sometime in July when we release our solicitation for proposals. And we'll have to see where this all falls out. Those priorities have not yet been determined by the department. We're seeking public input and collaboration on identifying those.
All right, thank you for that. Is there any comment or question from either member?
I just wanted to make sure that Caltrans and Department of Fish and Wildlife, the backlog here is of concern, and I'm glad you're working together.
I think it's a big backlog statewide in total.
It's a huge backlog, and how we can gradually get there. I noticed on the capital outlay projects for state parks, they're dealing with a fish package, fish screen issue down at Leo Carrillo State Beach along Pacific Coast Highway, and they're finally fixing that one.
Yes, ma'am.
But it's anything we can do to help expedite this, that would be good.
All right, thank you very much. I think we are finished with your department today. Thank you very much.